Hello and welcome to The Price of Time, the show where we explore the defining moments that made people who they are today and the impact of those moments over time. Here's your host, Luke Tatum. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Price of Time. My name is Luke Tatum. Today, I am joined by Jocelyn Bates. Jocelyn is a soul art guide, Akashic records guide, yoga nidra guide, and human design coach. She is also an expressive arts therapist / intermodal and emotional freedom technique master practitioner. She has been working with people for over 25 years in different capacities to help them find their authenticity and purpose in life. Jocelyn, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you. Excited to chat with you for a bit here today and get into some cool things that kind of made you who you are today, right? So if you would, just kind of tell us what we're going to talk about. Like, what is the one moment or one experience or one thing that we're going to hone in on today?
Well, I had an experience just about 2.5 years ago where, and of course it was an experience for everyone because it was COVID, right? Like, I feel like everybody had a crazy experience then, but my parents died 7 days apart during that whole debacle, really. And so that moment changed the trajectory of my life in like every facet. and it's it didn't change necessarily who I am, but it changed my perspective of where I'm moving, what I wanted to tap into more, and becoming truly me. Because for anyone who's lost their parents, it's both parents, it's a strange experience. Like, they're the only people that know you from the time you are, like, maybe if you have a brother or sister. I'm an only child. But they are the only ones that really understand your life in the same way. And so just all of my foundation cracked, and I had to figure out who I was again. And I got to do it without the rules and expectations that my parents kind of put on me when I was younger. So it was really interesting. I'm still the same person, but I get to focus in different facets of my life in different ways. And through that, I really, I started working more spiritually. Originally, I was an expressive art therapist, intermodal, like you had said, which is working in the arts and that place where the shift is between one art modality and the next. And that's where like the healing happens in that kind of therapy. And I had been working like that for a long time, but in therapy, there's not so much the spiritual aspect. And it was after my parents died that I began to get very, very spiritual. Though I've always had that. It's like it became my connection to them, and it became my connection back to myself. And so now, like, when I do things like soul art, it really taps into those original things I did, but it up levels it, right?
Okay. Interesting. And you'll have to define some of these things for me and for the audience, because, for the audience, just as an FYI, we've had a little bit of a pre-show. We had a brief conversation just to kind of test equipment and all those kind of things. So I know kind of what we were going to get into today, but I intentionally didn't get the whole story, right? And so I didn't want to ask these questions before. I want to know, live in the moment. I want it to be a natural conversation here on the episode. And so, when you say something like soul art, I don't know what that is, completely and totally ignorant to that. So, my sister's a counselor. And so, she works with people and is trying to help them, live functionally in their lives and things like that. And I think she's doing wonderful work. But you're doing something that's somewhat different from that, right? And so I want to get into all that. But maybe before we do, let's talk a little bit before your parents passed. Were they already in poor health, or were they, so it's total surprise then?
No, they just had their 51st anniversary and went on a vacation to Atlantic City for a week.
Wow. Okay.
The beaches and, gambling. They were only 74 and they were in very good health. But they came back with COVID, and then we all kind of got it. And we had this strain of it that was like, I guess it was the Delta, where I went down for 24 hours. And during that time, so did my parents and my mom particularly. And so when when I finally was able to stand up again within like 24 hours, I went upstairs and she was, we ended up calling the ambulance within like 2 hours, probably before that. And by the time they got there, her oxygen was at 74%. So, I'm not quite sure what happened in that sense, but then they took her in. And as soon as she got oxygen, she was fine. Except then the hospital, she was very holistic like I am. And the hospital ended up putting her on remdesivir, like off label, like a lot of it. And because you're on remdesivir, you're on all these other drugs. And so she'd never had any of that in her body. So her body was super clean. So when all of a sudden she had heart medications and then her kidney started to die and stop working and all the other, she got, pneumonia, not from the COVID, but from one of the other medications she was on. So she ended up, let's see, their 51st anniversary was on the 5th. She went into the hospital on the 6th and she died on the 10th. And then my dad went in. He really didn't even, he was doing fine with the COVID, but he was 6'5" and he was his oxygen was fine, but he was like up and down. He would get dizzy. So he fell. And I think he just wanted to go to the hospital to be close to my mom. So we brought him in. Of course, they kept them separate because it was COVID. And yeah, and then when she died, they were just in love. And so when she died, he had a release date, but they said to once she died, he didn't want to have the oxygen on anymore, and his oxygen just plummeted. He was at 96%, and in 2 hours it went to 60%, like about an hour after my mom dying. So he died. He kind of left the decision to me to put him on hospice, but the hospital at the time tried to restrain him, but he was a PTSD veteran. So when you restrain a PTSD veteran, it's and then have steroids in their system on top of it, it's nasty. And I knew my dad wouldn't want that. So the hospital, after I saw him on a Zoom of all things, the hospital said, you have two choices. Either we keep him restrained or you put him on hospice. And I was like, he doesn't want to live like this. So, so then he took, but his body, it was a slower process. It was 7 days of him letting go and leaving.
That's a lot all at once. And so for you, your perspective, you're just running back and forth between the two rooms. Were they letting you in? Well, you said Zoom. You're on Zoom.
I actually, they brought me in right before my mom died. They brought me in and they made sure to tell me that I was very lucky that I was let in because I had two parents. Both of my parents were there. They were going to make an exception to the rule. But then they brought me in and they brought my dad into the room too, which was the first time he saw her, but they didn't tell her anything. And so that time of Zoom, if my parents weren't answering the phone, I couldn't talk to them. And doctors weren't calling back. Nurses weren't calling back. I couldn't advocate at all. And so when they brought him in, he had no idea what was going on. And so he was there for 30, 40 minutes with me. At that point, he was like, this world is yours. She's suffering. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And then they kicked us both out before my mom died. They were like, you're not. And then when I was like, please let me stay to walk my mom through this, they told me that I should be grateful for the time I had, and they escorted me out. And my dad too. So it was really full of like, it was a strange time. And then even when I had them in the funeral home and before they were cremated, I asked to see their bodies because everything happened so fast. I wasn't prepared. And I thought in my head, I was like, if I could just see them in my brain, I'll be able to understand what's happening. Because after that, well, they didn't let me see them. I was told I'm not allowed to see their bodies, which maybe was a good thing. Maybe wasn't. I don't know. But I went almost 6 months completely dissociated. I have no memories. Like there's pictures, but I knew that I needed to somehow in my brain understand this, and I couldn't, and my kids didn't get to see them or anything like that. So it was a pretty intense time.
Now, are you, if you don't mind me asking, are you kind of an anti-allopathic medicine, like just generally, and none of you would ever step foot inside a hospital except for this one situation? Or
I hate hospitals, but I'm not anti anything. Well, yeah, I'm not. I choose to I work with a naturopath and a chiropractor and a homeopath, and yeah, I'm on that level. But But hospitals freak me out. I just feel like you lose so much control in a hospital, and I don't, and people are just going from room to room so fast that like, I, unfortunately, I've heard a lot of horror stories of hospitals. My mom, I'm horrified that if I'd known she was going to die, like if I'd known that was going to happen at all, if I had a sense of that, I would have let her die at home because she had such a fear of hospitals. She always said, "I'm going to die in a hospital." Like, so yeah, I don't like hospitals, but I've had 3 C-sections and I've made it through. I've been one of my very first, I had a stillbirth before I had my first child that was born alive, right? I had a son. And that was also a horrific hospital experience.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any good hospital stories to tell either. I mean, my son was born, in a hospital. We were planning to do a home birth, and it was a little too early in Texas for our midwife to legally deliver him. And so we had to go to a hospital, and then that was a whole debacle. And I'm not going to make the episode about me, okay? But it was a whole thing, and it ended up being multiple weeks when it really shouldn't have been.
And they like give you all the drugs and like, oh, I feel you 100%. I had to go to the hospitals because my stillbirth was it I I get a hyperthyroid when I'm pregnant, and so my body just caused the stillbirth. It wasn't a full like 39 weeks; it was 20 weeks, but they had me go through a full birth. So I was there for almost 18 hours, and when I finally came, I birthed my son, but before I was ready to birth him, I said to the nurses, "He's coming," and they said, "No, he's not," and they left the room. And I was in like such horror as it was. So finally they come back in, the baby's between my legs. I don't know what's going on because I knew what was happening, but I didn't. And then one of the doctors comes in and tries to pull the umbilical cord out to pull the placenta out. And she ended up causing almost inverting my uterus. I had to go in for an emergency D&C. It was like the most horrible thing. And so for me, it's like, I don't like hospitals. I never want to be around them.
I mean, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So
Yeah. But I understand the need for surgery, and I understand the need for like certain emergency care. Like I'm not like, if I had one of my children were like really hurt or something, I would absolutely go and get them to where they needed to be if that was going to be what helped.
Yeah, I mean, I'm alive because there are hospitals. I mean, I was in a car wreck when I was 15, and it shattered my skull, and so I have a whole story with that too, and so we wouldn't be having this conversation if there weren't hospitals. However, people also lean on hospitals for regular like basic care because they can't turn you away, and so that's like, is that good? I don't know. Are they really the people you want to be giving you basic care? Probably not. I mean, we could do a whole episode.
And it's all these like, there's all of these medications that people have no idea how they really affect your body, and like using antibiotics over and over again. And so like there's so many natural things that you can do in place of them. And it's like, I think we're so, the whole, I guess, allopathic medicine I feel like it's really bought out by pharmaceutical companies who they don't have your best interests at heart. I'll put it that way.
I think that's putting it probably mildly, right? And so, but the 2020, what occurred beginning in that year, or really late 2019, if you want to get technical, about it, then that I think was a big wake up call for a lot of people. And, certainly that's kind of where we're focusing today as well. But, I have a chapter, I wrote a finance book, so my book, it's about money. It's about the history of banking and all these things, and kind of how banks maybe don't have your best interest at heart. But there's a chapter in there about, and literally, so, section 1 is called Banks Are Not Your Friend, right? And then I have a section called Wall Street Is Not Your Friend, and so don't act that way, right? But there's a chapter about 2020. I have a chapter called 2020, and it's kind of about these things because it's like, hey, also you need to be aware that the government and these major corporations, in partnership, have the ability and have already shown that they are willing and able to completely shut down your livelihood, right? And so,
Yeah. Well, look what happened in Canada with the truckers and what they did with their bank accounts. So my
not to make
husband,
this a COVID episode, but
well,
it's
no, that whole period for anyone who's looking at a time that changed them. Many people lost belief and faith in things during COVID. And it's like, but we're creatures of habit. And it's like, I feel like as we move farther away, people slowly slip back into forgetting what the government did, forgetting, like, not to get political, but like I'm watching the race right now, the presidential race, and I'm not for either. Like I
we're
couldn't,
in good company then.
got
Yeah, I mean,
nothing.
this is
But I'm like, people are how Biden is this great guy. And I'm like, don't you guys remember when he came out and basically called anti-vaxxers like the enemy? That was like, and then it come to find out that the vaccine caused so many problems and is still rearing its ugly head in like, side effects. But people like, they forget that as the time becomes more comfortable again. And it's like, geez.
I mean, I like to say I have nothing positive to say about anybody in office, right? I don't like politics. I don't like any of that. It's just this huge black hole for all of our money and resources and effort and stuff, and just nothing good comes out of it. And so, that's again, infinitely long conversation that we can have there. But I want to focus on your story and not just complain about the government and all that, right? So so 2020 happens. You have these major losses in your life. Your whole foundation of your life is, as you said, kind of upended, and or cracks in the foundation, however you want to put it. And so then, what were you saying to yourself at that time? Like after you kind of got your feet back under you, then you're like, okay, what do I do? Or
I honestly had no clue what to do at the time. I was sitting with a lot of anger at the hospital at what was happening in the world, at everything. And I wasn't sure what to do with it. At first, I called some medical freedom lawyers and they're like, you have nothing because they had the PrEP Act. And I'm like, well, they're like, keep it tight though, because my mom is prime for a remdesivir lawsuit. And so like that's on the back burner. And I'm wandering through going, oh, now I have all these, my parents were totally fine. So there was no will, no nothing. I had randomly though, about 3 weeks before they died, my mom pulls me upstairs because we lived with them. And she goes, uh, just in case your father and I die at the same time, I want to show you where all our paperwork is. Right. And then 3 weeks before that, I was already working on a grief book. And because I've lost a lot of friends through my life. And I had said to my friend, I called my friend one day and I was like, if I ever lost my parents, I wouldn't survive. And like, so that all happened in like less than like 2 months. Those two things happened, which I thought was so creepy. Yeah. So really, when I came out, I was like, I don't even know what to do, but I do have kids. So I was there for them and I was watching them grieve too. And then I had to start doing the financial stuff. So I started getting emails and emails and emails. So I had to go into my mom's email. And I found in my mom's email, she really liked human design. I had introduced it to her years prior, but I had kind of taken a back seat with it. I had known about it and worked through it, but my mom was really into this one human design coach. And so I reached out to her and all of my money was in estates and lawyers and all, like it was crazy time. So I reached out to her. I said, I have no money, but I need to connect to my mom. And she had this witch wound through human design healing 6-month thing. It was about the moon cycles. And I was like, I really need to do this. And she's like, you're in. And I was like, thank you. So I feel like my mom kind of handed me that and I kind of went looking for it and she handed it to me. And after that, I felt a little bit more myself because in that particular human design program, it's a lot about, it actually takes into account emotional freedom technique and quantum alignment. And so I was able to work with people around my feelings about the hospital, my feelings about my dad, basically leaving me. And I worked through it with EFT and quantum alignment. And I got so jazzed about it because I could feel things shifting. Like I knew I wasn't better, but I could feel things shifting. And so I continued my journey in human design. I went to another person and I'm like, I need to do your program. I said, I really don't have any money because it's still all, it took me, because it was my parents and because one died first, 7 days later, everything had to switch from hers to my dad's and then to mine. And we had no will, no nothing. So like it took forever. It took like 2 years to figure it out. And I'm an only child. I mean, it shouldn't have been hard. But so then she's like, yeah. And she goes, I got you. Come take it. And I'm like, okay. And so I really got into human design even deeper. And I feel like that was my mom too. She's like whispering in her ear, my daughter needs this.
Can you tell us just what is, I mean, for those who don't
For
have
human
any
design.
awareness, what is human design?
Human design, and now it's going to sound woo-woo or whatever someone would call that, because it's like based off of your birthday, time, place, month, all of that, right? Just like astrology is, but it takes into account I Ching, numerology, astrology, Kabbalah, tree of life, it takes chakra system. It kind of works and uses quantum alignment to figure out what your body graph looks like. So just like in astrology, you would get your chart. There's a chart with a body graph in human design. But I've done a lot of human design readings and I've never met anyone who wasn't like, holy wow, right?
Well, okay. So what do you say to somebody, and I'm sorry to, switch questions again on you, but what do you say to somebody who has, I mean, for example, not that there's anyone like this, but like a library of, econ books behind them and, history and those sorts of things. Like, I have a book about specifically a libertarian angle on the 60s back here. I'm not pointing very well, but like, stuff like that. I don't know anything at all and would be highly skeptical of, say, numerology or things like that, right? So if you're trying to, I'm not saying sell it to me, and I'm not asking you to be, salesy, but what? Why should I care? I guess is the question, right?
So it's funny because my husband is a money science person. He's like, and his thing is called the anarchist investor. So he himself is, and he was a real skeptic too. And I'm like, let me just do your chart. Let me just do it. And he's like, all right. And then we had someone else do his chart who didn't know him personally that could because I could easily read into something right with him because I'm married to him. And he has been a believer ever since. Because what it does is, it's so interesting. Human design has types and profiles and open centers and defined centers. And so if you go into your chart, you can see how to communicate better with your family, with your friends, how to work with your own belief systems and conditioning through really simple methods. Sometimes when I think of astrology, my brain gets tied because it is really deep, and human design goes that deep as well. But there's so many simple things you can learn from human design that will absolutely change your life. Simple example, like I'm what's called a generator. So when I need to answer to yes or no questions, it is for my life with my husband. It has been a problem because we'll go out for date night and he'll be like, where do you want to go? And I'll be like, I don't know. And then there's an argument, right? Because I don't even know. Because then he's like, why aren't you telling me? I don't know. And it's always been. And then when we talked about our charts, I'm a generator. I need to answer yes or no questions. So we started having him ask me, okay, do you want to go for sushi? Yes. Do you want to go? Yeah. And it has totally alleviated our communication problem. And so there's like simple things that you can do, but it also goes really deep towards your purpose, your life work, your evolution, your challenges, how to best, if you're having a challenge, how to best kind of tap into your energetic map of human design and use that to your advantage. So it's very cool for parents too. So it's just like I said, communicating with my husband. I have the same with my kids. I now understand the best way for them to eat, the best way for them to sleep, what they require to have a good night's sleep, how to communicate, one person needs a yes or no question. Another one needs to be, I'm wondering how you feel about that, right? Like, and I know that like my one child has an emotional wave all the time like this, and I have to follow her wave till she gets calm to ask her questions. So it's like, it's really, it's super practical. Whereas sometimes astrology goes off in me into this other world. And it does tap into astrology because you're still looking at planets and planetary movements and transits, but it's not as tangible for me when I look at a human design chart. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. You know, you, and I'm sure you know this without me saying it, but you know, there's still in my mind, of course, there's a level of skepticism, right? And so it's not to say I'm not putting you on the spot, like, well, hey, you know, I don't believe what you're doing. It's just to say that it's not something I'm familiar with. And so the point of this show is not to take sides, right? It's to go, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're like, what? Just because you're born at a certain time in a place, why would that make you this way or that way? I totally get it.
I'm naturally skeptical. Of course, I'm skeptical of most things, and you know, but it's also true of me that I end up in contrarian positions more often than not. You know, and so if everybody believes something, it's fairly likely that I'll at least take a more nuanced angle on that and go, well, you know, is that really true? You know, kind of break it down, but that's maybe it applies, maybe it doesn't, you know? And so I just kind of have to chew on it for a bit, I guess is maybe the way I'll phrase it. So
it's interesting too, just like learning your basic stuff and just what I say is it's an experiment. That's what I say. So like for me, you could look at tarot cards, you could look at astrology or human design. You could open a book and read whatever line comes out to you. If you're curious with intention in what you're doing, you're going to take something away from it. To me, when I look at it that way, like when I think of life, it's about intention. So if I am going to figure out why am I like this, right? Or like I have this challenge, this problem, right? I'm going to create the intention. I'm going to put some energy into an intention to figure it out. And no matter what I do, even if a bird comes down and sings to me when I'm on the, you know, it's going to feed me information. And I'm going to process it as my little human, right? And my human experiment. And I'm going to learn from it. I feel like life is it can be broken down to be that simple. But oftentimes our thinking gets involved and our judgmental mind and our external rules, they get involved. And so we miss a lot of the cues and we forget to make the intentions.
Sure. I mean, you know, I'm a big fan of, say, Carl Jung. Okay. And so I've read several of his books, not all of them by any stretch. He's got a lot of material, you know,
He's got
but
a lot.
I'm a big fan. Okay. And so one of the things that he'll get into sometimes is that, you know, man of antiquity, you know, these isolated tribes that haven't, you know, modernized or whatever, we look at what they're doing, we think they're completely ridiculous. Like they have these strange superstitious behaviors, and he'll go, well, you know, is that actually nonsense? Or is he acting in a hard-nosed, rational way in the setting that he's in? And, you know, it's kind of an open question, but he'll at least make the case for the other side of that. And so, you know, I'm open to interpreting things in a different way, you know, and putting different lenses on. I wear glasses, so we'll just say glasses, right? Different lenses on my glasses to see the world in a slightly different way and to get a fresh perspective on things. And so, you know, it's very interesting stuff. And I'm glad that you're, you know, walking me through it, because it's something that if I just read, say, your bio or something somewhere, I'd go, I don't know what any of that is, you know, and I just move on with my life, right? And so it wouldn't have had the same impact without the one-to-one kind of walking through it that we're doing now. So, okay, you're doing all this stuff, and you're into all these things now, and so this all was kind of born after 2020.
Yeah, you know, I was looking at my mom's emails, trying to figure out the finances. She gave me that one human design, and then I got the next one. And then while I was in that human design, I took a workshop in the Akashic records. It was just trying to like find your own Akashic. I had no idea what Akashic records were. Like,
what are those?
Like,
yeah, so I don't know what that is.
No idea. Yeah, I was you, and now I understand it. But the Akashic records, and this is going to sound really even more woo. I think it's in a dimension of pure knowledge. And actually, many religions, and I'm not really an organized religion person at all, but many organized religions and books of religions, they might reference it as the book of life. or the Akashic records. A lot of religions recognize this, that there is a knowledge of every living thing. And so an Akashic record, like everybody has an Akashic record. You have one, your soul has one from the moment your soul was born. And it has all the information, past lives, present lives, and future lives. Because in the Akashic records, I like to think of it as a crystal ball. The Akashic records are like a crystal ball. Time is all swirling around at the same time instead of being this linear thing. So you can look towards future, present, and past lives. Akashic records are just that, the knowledge of your soul. You're not going to go into the Akashic records to divine anything. You're there to get curious. You're like, well, maybe I do have past lives or ancestors or ancestry wounds. I'll tell you, I was working on a major ancestor wound and I got sick for 3 months. It was so deep in my maternal side. I don't know how I would say that. My dad's maternal sides. And it was so deep. It was this wound of like I just saw this picture of like an empty womb giving to their kids everything and keeping nothing for themselves. And in his line, all of the moms are like single moms with like 7, 8, 9 kids. Either someone died or they left or, whatever it be, every one of them. And I worked on this wound because I don't want to have that happen to me. Let's work on that, and I was shedding this wound for over 3 months. I was so sick with the worst sinus infection ever. And no one in the house is getting sick. I'm like, there's 5 people in my house. People get sick. No one got sick. And finally I had a Reiki session and we cut the last cords of it off. The next day I was 100%. It was like the coolest thing. But you can do that work in the Akashic records. So they're actually channeled. They're not divined. You're not going to find out in a month of this is going to happen, but you can find your strengths, or weaknesses, and your karma. So there is that, but they're not. It's not a medium reading. It's channeled through people.
You don't get a library card to go check it out or anything.
No, you could go like tonight. If you want to go check it out, you can go tonight. He's like, you can literally sit and meditate into your own Akashic records. You have to kind of be trained to go into other people's because there's a high level of integrity going into someone else's records. You have to have permission. There has to be integrity because that's their soul's knowledge. And that's a beautiful and honor. Like I'm full of honor that people let me into their Akashic records. But I had originally been in the human design class and they had a workshop and I'm like, what is this? Like, I don't even get it. So I do this meditation and I ended up in some past life. Have you ever had a dream? I don't know if you had anyone close to die, or have you ever had a dream where someone who was gone visited you?
So I almost never recall a dream upon waking. And this is not something I expected to talk about, right? But I have there's a handful of dreams I had as a kid that make no sense, and then I still remember pretty well. And then basically nothing for, decades here. And then, occasionally I have some interesting little short snippets of stuff. But no, to answer your question directly, no. But that's just because I don't have a big catalog of dreams that I can recall. So
on a side note, we just started to use grounding sheets not too long ago. Grounding sheets go like underneath your sheet and it plugs into the grounding port of I don't know if that port is the right name, but in the plug in the wall.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah,
socket in the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And since we've had the grounding sheets on, which are amazing for aches, for arthritis, for sleeping better, it's amazing. Both my husband and I and my daughter have been dreaming much more. So I don't know, maybe because you get deeper and more calm in your sleep. But there are, so I didn't have them until my parents died, these dreams of like being visited. And they've happened a few times now. And it's like you're awake and yet asleep. It's the closest thing I would think to lucid dreaming, which I don't really lucid dream. So it's the closest thing I would think would be like lucid dreaming. And there's just very strange dreams. It's like you're aware and you're dreaming, and yet you can feel, you can see, you can smell, you can touch. It's very strange. And I love it when my parents come, but they don't often come. Like when they first died, I had 3 or 4. And then just recently was the last one I had. But what happened is when I was in my records, when I was doing the meditation, I ended up in a past life that felt like that. I was literally walking around knowing I was like almost dreaming about what was happening. And it was like in the 60s. And it was a very intense past life. I was easy to come out of. And after we came out of it, I was so fascinated that I went to this teacher and I said, I have to have a session with you because I have to know what I did, what that meant, what happened. It's fascinating, right? This is how we get into strange and odd things. And then she goes, you're meant to be an Akashic Records guide. She's like, come take my training. There's my mom, another breadcrumb, right? Like,
and so this is what, 2021 or
this was in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. Cause it took me 6 months to get out, So this was 2022 and I took her class and I really learned a lot about the Akashic Records. And I got to work really closely with my spirit team, my ancestors. In the Akashic Records, you have masters and ascending masters and mentors and guides and guardians. And I got to really work closely with them. And at the same time I was doing that, my mom's friend, who also married me and did blessings for all of my kids, is a soul shaman. And she was taking me under her wing to do some soul shamanism work along with my Akashic Records work. So that was another breadcrumb, right? And then when you have like deep grief, like I had, that like partly only comes up, bubbles at like here and there, like, okay, I can heal this piece. I think I'm good. 3 months later, another piece comes. I have to heal that because, that right after I finished the Akashic Records training, I went into a deep spiral. And I think it was because it was the first winter I was aware. And because my kids had sniffles like every other week. And every time they had the sniffle, I thought they were going to die. And so I never slept. I sat looking at my kids while they were sleeping. I couldn't sleep. My anxiety, my heart rate was up. I just started thinking, oh my God, everyone's going to die. Like I can't, what if I don't get there in that 24-hour period, right? Like it was this whole big thing. And I was going crazy because I would get anxious and then I wouldn't sleep. And because I didn't sleep, I'd get more anxious. And because I was more anxious, I couldn't sleep. And I was going insane. So I started doing Insight Timer yoga nidra meditation. I don't know how I found it. It just ended up on my phone. I don't know who put it there. I think it was my mom. And I started listening. And yoga nidra is the most beautiful meditation for balancing the nervous system. It balances the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And there are also meditations that really work with the vagus nerve. It works with what are called koshas, which are the subtle selves. So you slowly relax into each subtle self. And it saved me. I was doing 2 to 3 meditations a day just to get, like, because I wouldn't sleep at night at first, but I would sleep in the yoga nidras. And the rest, like if you take a 30-minute yoga nidra, it's as if you slept 3 to 4 hours. You'll come out of that 30 minutes, you'll have 5 hours, like easy.
Like a meditative state, is that basically? Okay.
Yeah, it's guided meditation.
Okay.
Yeah, for people who think, I'm sorry, I should have said that. Some people think yoga nidra is like work. It's not. It's like totally effortless, totally effortless. And so I reached out to my teacher, she became my teacher. And I said, I didn't mean to go learn how to be a guide or anything. I was just like, you saved my life. Like, I think I was about to get really sick and I could, I was going, like starting to, have these like visions and stuff because I was not in the right place. And she said, well, come take my training. And I said, okay. And I feel like that was my mom again, right? Like, boom. So I took that training. And so that got me, look at that. There I am. That got me doing that work. And then I felt finally ready to go into soul art, which is something that I've known for a very long time. Being an expressive art therapist, I knew about soul art, but I knew about it as I left school, but I just finished doing my master's program and I was like, I am not doing any more school. So yeah, I was like, I can't have any more teachers, no more. But when I finished the yoga nidra, I was like, you know what? It's time. Like, I don't want to be an expressive art therapist. The way I look at it, and I said this on another show recently, I think of like drawing, right? Just in a simple analogy, drawing for healing. Drawing for healing as an expressive art therapist is like on lined paper. But drawing for healing as a soul artist is on a blank canvas, because you can reach out to the higher, most aligned energy that you have. You can speak of the soul, you can speak of the spirit, the soul can speak through you. And doesn't have to be said in a certain way, right? So that's kind of like, but it's very similar work in a lot of ways. So yeah, I found soul art, which is basically having a conversation with your soul through creative expression. And soul art is journeys. You go on soul art journeys that create intention, body map with creative expression. You find insights and spirit actions. It has been something that has been the ultimate in my healing of grief. Like, everything got me to the place of soul art, but soul art has allowed me to fully, like, really lay it out in front of me, see it and accept it and walk with it in a way that I couldn't before.
It's, I mean, again, I think I could easily be accused of finding Jungian stuff everywhere, right? Without it necessarily being there. But Jung used to draw mandalas all the time, and he very much talked about art and had a lot to say about art and things like that. And obviously dreams. We talked about dreams and some of those things. And so I do hear echoes of some of the same sorts of ideas. And is it the same exact thing just with a different name? I don't know. Is it is it a completely different take on exactly the same subject? I don't know. And so because I'm no expert on what you're doing, but it's just I think it's very interesting because Jung is considered like a serious name in psychoanalytic circles, and some of what you're saying may not be right. I think there's maybe a stigma right there, and so I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Just about the positioning of it?
You know what? I love the work of Jung. And many years ago, I did a Gabrielle Roth 5 Rhythms workshop. And there was a psycho dramatist who ran part of it. And we did this it was the most amazing experience. So when I went into school, I really wanted to be a psychodrama therapist for a while, but they didn't have that program at the time. But I learned from one of the best. Jay Moreno is the one who really started psychodrama, and his friend was my teacher. So, so I learned a lot. So when I went to this workshop out in California, it was like you had to kind of work through whatever was going on for you in the moment. And they had what's called own your own shit corner. And then you had the person on the stage, and then you had everybody watching, and you were kind of working out this presence that you had in your body at the moment. So it might be like, I'm nervous, and you might have like a move or a repetitive move to it. So someone would come up and be your double for that, so that you could let it go and move on to the next thing that was coming through your body. It's very Jungian work. And you'd have, by the end of it, it'd be a symphony of all these things going on in your body and your mind and your heart and, in everything. And then you'd have people in the own your own shit corner going, this is ridiculous. Like, cause everybody in the moment has to be present. Right. So like people are like, I can't, like, this is, whatever they're saying, like, get real. Oh my God. So you have this like room of people who are completely in the present moment holding. And then at the end of it, you come out of it and you look and you see the symphony of your life, how people outside are seeing you, all the different moments that happened on your stage. And you're just watching all these people hold it in movement and in sound. And that's very Jungian. And it's so beautiful to actually witness. So like these concepts that Jung talks about are all across. I mean, to be honest, creativity for me is where it's at regardless. And when I say creativity, that could mean dance, visual art, writing. It can mean cooking and gardening and whatever it be for you. But the act of creation, the act of creating, and then also embodying it. So when you're visual art, you're embodying it with that paintbrush, right? With the strokes that you create. If you embody it with dance, you're moving your body literally. If you're embodying it with spoken word, you're speaking it out, right? That kind of thing is, I believe, what is truly healing and truly your soul and your spirit coming to life right in front of you. And so that's kind of what soul art is. And yeah, it has pieces of Jungian You can even find, I work with archetypes and mythological, and historical people all the time when I'm doing my soul art journey. Sometimes I'll intentionally tap into someone. Just recently, I did one where I intentionally tapped into Mary Magdalene because it was a soul art journey that I was working on, like passion and desire. And I'm like, that's perfect. So I tapped into Mary. Of course, I don't know if you know the true story of Mary Magdalene, but you got to know the true story to understand that. But yeah. And so like I tap into all of these and archetypes all the time. You know, he gave us such a beautiful encyclopedia of human experience and ways to be curious, to experiment. You know, there's no right or wrong way, but you can use the tools that he set out.
Sure. Yeah. Whether you call it shadow work or you call it something else, it's kind of like, as long as you're doing the right things, then it's going to work out. Right. So that's really cool. Now let's fast forward. I mean, maybe one more time a little bit. So in the present now, I mean, is your let's say day to day experience, you're working with clients, you're just pursuing this, and I mean, you've been telling stories of recent, sessions with clients, and so do you feel like you've found your stride, and that's what you're meant to do, and all those things?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've always been a creative person and I've always understood the power of the arts. I just haven't tapped into before my parents died, I hadn't tapped into this totally spiritual element of it and like the maps that are laid out in front of you during it if you pay attention. Um, and this is like, yeah, this is my path. Just going back to human design, I am a unicorn in human design. I'm a 4-1 profile and a quad right, which is like unicorn. Not many people. It's like to be a 4-1 is less than 3%. And then out of that less than 3% to be a quad right is less than 1% of the population. So it's like, and as a 4-1, you have a fixed fate, and my fixed fate is about creativity and dreaming. And it just means that you don't veer off of that. And whenever I tend to veer off of that and I go off and try to be strategic or try to like figure things out on my own or try to fit myself into a program, right? Whenever I try to do that or I step away from creativity and try to force something, my life breaks down. It just breaks down. I can't even explain it, but it's very much a 4-1 profile. And so I am here now, and I can feel it when I'm correct and on the tracks of it. I can feel it, and I just continue forward. And it's very easy. It's effortless. It's full of grace. I like things come out very easily for me. I speak to what people need, and I just love the journey. I love it. I love it so much. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, and all this came from reading some emails, basically.
It started with
Yeah,
an email.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
And of
Crazy.
course, and here's it for you. It was a financial email that I had to open.
Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah.
we have those conversations all the time, not about this, but about, like what kind of paperwork you're going to need to have, if something happens to your parents or whoever's being insured, because we do life insurance. I mean, that's our realm. And so, I don't have the same conversation you and I had, but we talked about those documents I'm sure that you were going through, right? And so it's kind of an interesting divergence into this territory, from such a uh, let's say mundane sort of beginning, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I wish they had done some paperwork because it cost me an insane amount from the lawyers, which it wouldn't have cost me if they just had a will or something along that line. But it was crazy the amount of back and forth. And when you're going through something like that, like you're going through the grief of it, and mine was overwhelming because it was also 3 kids and my husband all grieving too. Um, Having to deal with all the calls and the paperwork is like it so hard. It's so hard. At one point, I was very nice to people on the phone. And then one day, I lost it on some guy because he had called me 3 times. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he just wouldn't let go. And my husband ran up because I was like almost screaming at him. I'm like, this is it. I'm done. Like, And he's like, let me take the phone. I'm like, it was so many, and it's overwhelming.
I mean, it's not easy even if all the paperwork is in order, but not having those sorts of things done can certainly exacerbate that and turn it into a much more protracted thing. And, that's even if you have a simple estate, right? If you have a complicated estate and there's businesses that people own and things like that, I mean, it can just go on for a long, long, long time, years and years and years, and costs. I mean, we won't talk about how much money, the attorneys cost, but a lot, and it only gets higher. So,
Yeah. I mean, that was really hard. And when I finally got my head up from it, it was like, I couldn't believe I made it through. Um, and like I said, for ours, it was complicated because of those 7 days. So everything had to be processed twice. And it was crazy. And I had to go back and forth like 1,000 times to everything. And, yeah, it was really nutty.
I'm glad you got through it, and you could breathe the free air, and you could, kind of find your path from that. And, we talked about this before, but, when I conceptualized this podcast, it was like, oh, tell me something cool that happened in your life that shaped who you are today. And I've been contacted by a few people that have horrible stories to tell, but that's what led to the positive transformation. And so, it's a weird kind of blending there of, well, that's terrible, but I'm really glad that, your life has changed in the way that it's changed. Right. And so,
You know what? I've thought about it a lot, and it's very taboo to talk about death, right? Is you're not supposed to talk about it and what goes on, or what your feelings are about it. And if you know someone who has someone who dies, you never know what to say. But what I have found to people who I have been able to talk to is that traumas, and you don't need traumas like this, but traumas like this, they are a portal. They are a place to transform your life if you choose to. It's like an open door. It's like your heart cracks open and you have a momentary door open that wouldn't normally be as easy to access, that you can go in and find yourself again. And it's like, it's weird because I was actually on a show the other day and I said, it's weird to say, but it's like ever since, it was almost like the biggest gift in my life. It's not a gift, but it's like, it was an opening that provided me an opportunity to like literally step into myself in the most amazing way. And I'm not saying it's good that they died at all, but if they're going to die, I might as well use that opportunity to transform. And so I used to work with brain injury and spinal cord injury as a therapist. And I also worked with sexual trauma and domestic violence. So I worked with people in very, very crazy situations. But I would find that the people who actually did have, like, say, spinal cord injuries, so they were walking one day, the next they're in a wheelchair for the rest of their life. A lot of them, if I've talked to a few of them since I've worked with them, they're in a place now where they never imagined their life could be this good. And they don't walk. They're maybe from the chest down or the waist down. And they never thought their life would be as good as it is. Like that in and of itself is a portal. It is a grief it's a type of grief. You're grieving the loss of your body. But so you don't have to have those moments. I don't think you have to have those moments. If you just get curious and start like questioning and diving deep into things, you can do it too. But in the moment of a tragedy, there is an open door that you can walk through easily. I mean, you kind of have to, it takes a lot of courage, but you have to kind of face it, right? But there is a moment where you can absolutely transform everything in your life if you want to.
I think that's a wonderful place that we can kind of wrap. It's a great, we'll probably turn that into a clip, for later. That's wonderful. So, and I completely agree with that sentiment. So how can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing, and what's the best way to reach out, those kind of things, if you'll plug your stuff?
Yeah, you can go on my website, jocelynbates.net. And I'm on Insight Timer, Jocelyn Bates. I have free yoga nidras and breath work for anyone who needs to balance their nervous system. I always say, like, when I go and do like social media things for yoga nidra, I'm like, and I'm talking to everybody who has anxiety, who has depression, who has, and it's like stress. It's for everybody. And I do it for free because people need it. And it's my service that I give back. And of course, I'm on Instagram and Soul Sessions by Jocelyn.
Wonderful. And is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to say here as we wrap up? If we didn't get into some area, some comment that you were hoping to make or somewhere we wanted to go with it that we just didn't get to, then, floor is yours.
I was just following along. No, yeah, it's all good.
Okay, wonderful. Jocelyn, I really appreciate your time and the episode. And I think this will be great. So, thank you all for watching. Thanks for tuning in on this. Be sure to check the description for the links to everything that we talked about here today. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to The Price of Time, hosted by Luke Tatum. Subscribe to us for more episodes. Check the description box below to learn more about our guest. And if you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend.